And that's the stupidest statement that's ever been made. Tim Kaine never read the Federalist Papers.
Right.
So 200,000 years ago, our genetic ancestors did not have a soul. They were sitting at the border of Namibia and Angola, cracking coconuts and eating bananas. People who are religious have the most successful marriages by far.
This is another quote from another great leader here. The notion that rights don't come from laws and don't come from the government, but come from the Creator, that's what the Iranian government believes. So the statement that our rights do not come from laws of our government is extremely troubling.
There it is, Tim Kaine. And that's the stupidest statement that's ever been made, clearly showing that Tim Kaine never read the Federalist Papers and surely never read, the Declaration of Independence, which contradicts exactly what he's saying. We hold these truths to be self-evident. We don't need to make recourse to laws. These rights belong to every human being by their very human nature, by their very human existence, and so they must be protected under the law.
Right.
So the law is responsible for upholding the rights, the natural rights that belong to all of us by nature, and not vice versa. The rights are not derived from the law themselves. He missed the point completely. And by the way, it is interesting to see that our founding fathers were a lot more intelligent than that statement by Tim Kaine, because they never point out natural rights in the Constitution. They didn't do that because the Declaration of Independence talks about we hold these truths to be self-evident. We don't need to make any recourse to any laws. And laws don't give us any rights. Rights belong to us by our very nature. They come to us from the Creator, who made us equal and gave us these inalienable rights. Now, that's one thing. And then you get to the Constitution. In the Constitution, we, the people of the United States, right, declare blah, 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 blah. So when you have we the people are declaring, now you're declaring certain things into existence. Notice that the natural rights, the inalienable rights, are nowhere to be found except in the 14th Amendment, which says no state shall violate the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So in other words, it's a further prohibition of violating the natural rights of citizens in any given state, so that, the federal recognition of inalienable rights, also the states must recognize it equally, but no derivation of natural rights from the law, just the opposite. So I'm sorry to say,
Right. Well,
Tim missed the point.
Here was a story we were going to talk about, but it's kind of been, kind of placated because there was a story that was coming up that Cardinal Cupich was going to honor Senator Dick Durbin from Illinois, who is well-known pro-abort, alleged Catholic. I'm assuming he is, and many of the bishops, including Thomas Paprocki and other ones, I know Cardinal Dolan, and there's many others who, at least 10 others, who came out and said this is really, inappropriate, and even the Pope weighed in somewhat with a kind of, I'm not sure where this is going, but we have to be careful of who we cast out or not. But at the end of the day, the real question boiled down to, and we're lucky because Durbin was at least smart enough to back off and say he wasn't going to accept any award and to kind of let the furor go away. But the idea that of even whether he's pro-abort or he's against the death penalty and you're weighing off the seamless garment, at the end of the day, any one of those things certainly would question whether somebody should be getting a Catholic honor. Nobody says that he shouldn't be honored by the state for whatever service he's done, but why is the Catholic Church honoring this particular person?
Right. Well, when I was a president of a university, I definitely, had a speaker's policy that basically said we shouldn't be giving awards to speakers who are definitely trying to do something that undermines the Catholic Church's teaching, especially on the whole area of natural and inalienable rights of people, or on the sanctity of human life. We just shouldn't be doing this. And a prelate. I mean, it's mystifying to me. That's all I can say. I don't get it. I just can't even possibly fit the two pieces together. It's like we say one thing out of one side of our mouth and do something else out of the other side of our mouth. Very confusing at the very least.
Right, absolutely, especially for the lay people. But the one good thing to show, out of this is that it shows that if the laity stands up and people start to say something and complain, that it is possible to block some of these things, and that we should realize that all of these are a fait accompli. That and that there are some bishops who have the backbone to stand up as well. I thought this was interesting. Actor Tim Allen forgives, this is a Register story, forgives his father's killer, and he was inspired by Erica Kirk's witness, of course, Charlie Kirk's widow, who basically indicated that she had forgiven the man who at least we believe has killed him, but whoever did it, obviously she's forgiving that person. And apparently Tim Allen had a situation, you know, where his father was killed, and he said because he saw what she did, that he finally was able to do that. And that's where you get into really the idea of Christian witness, right?
Right. And, you know, I've always said, I mean, this is, you know, if you don't forgive from the heart at some juncture, violence will beget violence and vengeance will beget vengeance. It's just an endless cycle. And you know, it just keeps building up, and the retribution for the retribution for the retribution just keeps, you know, the violence, you know, increasing, and it causes such an upheaval. And it's way beyond what it started off as, but Christ just had the one solution, and that solution was forgive the person from the heart, turn it over to God, pray for your enemies. And this little prayer that I use all the time is great for me, especially when somebody is definitely trying to bust my chops, and I basically, I mean, very intentionally so, I just say, I give up, Lord. You're the just judge. You take care of it. And I just pray that prayer, Lord, you're the just judge, you take care of it. I hand it over to him. I just don't want to be, you know, foaming and fuming and getting angry. It just doesn't do any good for anybody.
Right.
And at the end of the day, if I kind of do that, I hand it over to God, and I just say, you're just you take care of it. I don't want this anymore. I don't want to fume and foam. I don't want to hate. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to resent. You just say that, and eventually you're going to start forgetting. And if you start forgetting, you know, after, you know, 6 months or something, you know, it just dies away in a slow death. And the world is better off for that dying away. And I think Erica Kirk, she sure got it. And Tim Allen apparently got it as well. But give it to God, and that's the way to do forgiveness. And remember that little prayer, you're the just judge, Lord, you take care of it.
Dear Father Spitzer, in a recent interview, Pope Leo discussed church teaching and LGBTQ issues. Is the Pope saying that the teaching of the church will likely change if attitudes change concerning LGBTQ activities and marriage, or is he saying that attitudes within the LGBTQ community need to change to be more in line with Catholic teaching? Can actions that are considered sinful today possibly not be sinful in the future if attitudes change? This is Walter.
I can just simply say this. Once something is declared, you know, we're not talking about a person here, right? We're talking about an activity, right? And so you're either the activity is going to be destructive to the human personality or destructive to the people around you. If it is, normally that activity, you know, the church is going to say that's not good for you. It would be intrinsically wrong. There's something wrong with that activity. So if you're stealing something, right, you know, that's going to not only harm the people around you that you're stealing from, it harms you. It brings you into a whole, you know, light of disconnection with yourself and with authenticity and, of course, with God. So the point is, you know, whether it be stealing, whether it be, you know, some kind of sexuality outside of marriage, whether it be, you know, which is clearly in you know, the focus of the Pope's you know, concern, or the question that was asked of the Pope, those things aren't going to change.
Right.
They're just simply not going to change. I mean, we've got evidence coming out of our ears. Those who are engaging in sexuality outside of marriage, on, you know, not even on a promiscuous level, right? You just start having affairs or something like that. what happens? The spiritual life breaks down. I mean, this is not my survey. This is the Pew surveys. These are the surveys that, you know, the University of Oklahoma, et cetera. You can see that the greater you know, you participate in those activities, the less likely you are to participate in your church services, or to believe in a scripture, or to acknowledge belief in God, or to acknowledge that prayer is helpful. Now, this is not just from Pew and from University of Oklahoma. It's from multiple studies that have been done along these lines. In fact, these were done with respect to cohabitation. One of the big results that the Thornton studies of the reciprocity of religion and marriage, you know, what Thornton said was, you know, essentially that you can see that cohabitation over a long period of time breaks down religious commitment. So if you're doing this outside of the setting of a covenant love that is specifically declared to be exclusive and permanent, right, was what we call marriage, right, and you know, in a sacramental marriage before God, right, if you don't have that, what winds up happening is you become more and more distant from your religion. And what do we know about religion and marriage? The people who are religious, who practice their religious, and who are prayerful have the most successful marriages by far. They are happier in their marriages. They're happier with their children in their marriages. They have a whole sense of transcendent hope in their marriages. They connect with other people who are like them, you know, and have a set of really, you know, close, what I call level 3, level 4 friendships, you know, in their marriage. And it's a very satisfying thing. It doesn't have to be, you know, it could just be multiple, you know, sexual relationships outside of marriage, whatever it may be, heterosexual, homosexual, whatever. But if you have multiple relationships, you can see a direct correlation with, you know, separation from your religion, a decreased interest in spirituality. And what do you find in place of it? You find 3 times increases in you know, your depression rate, anxiety rate, and of course a 7 times increase oftentimes in suicidal ideation.
And we also
it's emotional health as well.
But well, we've also seen the health of churches, because those churches who've kind of gone down this pathway on the gay rights issues and, you know, women bishops and, let's say, gay clergy and those kind of things, those churches are falling apart. I mean, those steps have not made those churches stronger or done anything to make one thinking, oh, see, they're onto something here. It's like these studies. It shows you that after the fact that these ideas don't work. And the reason they don't work is because they're not part of God's plan, apparently.
Well, well, that's true too. But I mean, you're right. From a sociological perspective, they don't. Those churches have shown to be, you know, short in longevity. Instead of their numbers increasing, their numbers fall precipitously, inversely proportional to any expectation that could have happened. So from a sociological perspective, a growth perspective, et cetera, it's a disaster area. But I think one of the things that, you know, C.S. Lewis pointed out a long time ago in a wonderful book called The Abolition of Man is human beings, we do have what he calls 8 principles, you know, that he calls, you know, the law of, I'm just going to call it non-maleficence for the time being, but it just means don't commit an unnecessary harm. We all believe this, you know, even the law of beneficence, we believe in that. The principle of honoring your father and your mother, right? You know, the idea that, you know, that parents, relatives, you know, have a wisdom and a just desert to be respected and honored for what they do and what they have done, and so forth. So he goes through these 8 different principles that seem to be intrinsic to every human conscience, to every religion, to every culture, north, south, east, and west. When I say every religion, I'm excluding Satanism, that obviously holds contrary to probably half of those principles. But you know, if you just preclude that and don't call it a religion, then you basically see a universalism there that's pretty clear. And that universalism, what Lewis would say is, when we see a religion acting contrary to the 8 principles that are just kind of built into us, or our sense of nobility, our sense of decency, or our sense of guilt or shame is built into us, you generally begin to suspect inauthenticity if what's being proclaimed from the pulpit, is, contradictory to the sense of nobility or the sense of shame or guilt that's intrinsic to you. You begin to sense that there's something wrong there. And a lot of people, it's not just the fact that people, just disagree with it maybe on a public policy level. That's not it at all. It's almost that it disagrees with something almost built into them in terms of an inner voice that just says, there's something very, very strange going on here. There's something wrong here. And I'm not going there. I'm not buying this. This is not for me. And people do vote with their feet. And they vote, as C.S. Lewis says, with the natural law that's intrinsic to their conscience.
Well, I think
he tries to.
I think I'm sorry, Father. I was always thinking with that. I think it's Lewis. Men without chests. I think that's the world we're living with.
Men without chests.
Basically, what we're dealing with is people who are unwilling to stand up for the truth for fear of, disfavor in society, and that's what we have to fight against. Catholics can believe in the theory of evolution so long as they do not deny the creation of a unique trans-physical soul by God in every human being. Can Catholics believe that the physical, biological dimensions of human beings evolved from other species? And the answer you say is yes. Does the church really say that that's okay?
Yeah, the church really does. I mean, in other words, you're not saying that your soul came from a great ape. That's clearly not true. As a matter of fact, I do not believe that earlier hominid ancestors of ours had transphysical souls like we do. So you never have to worry about, okay, you just say, well, could the brain development come from great apes? Yeah, the brain development, can come from earlier hominids. However, the transphysical soul that we have, that we can see witnessed, for example, in near-death experiences or terminal lucidity, etc., that soul, does 7 things and 7 actions or capabilities which we cannot explain by the mere physical processes and structures of our physical brains. I mean, we do abstract intellection. Physical processes and structures in the physical brain cannot do that. That's why chimpanzees flunk the basic syntax test. They can memorize all the perceptual words they want. 200 words in American Sign Language for an intelligent chimpanzee, but they'll never get the difference between dog bites man and man bites dog. That's just impossible because they can't do predication. They have no abstract concepts. They have no abstract intellection. Same thing with self-consciousness. Yes, you can get an ape to look in a mirror and then point to his forehead when he sees the image of himself, with the X in the mirror. He can do that, but that doesn't mean he's self-conscious in the sense that human beings are aware of their awareness. I mean, that's a test that certainly does not measure the reality of human self-consciousness. And the same thing with religion. Let's face facts. That, great apes don't have any sense of perfect truth, perfect love, perfect beauty, perfect goodness, or perfect home. They just don't. And of course, we have tried to you have all these crazy anthropologists that are going out living with the apes and trying. I saw some manifestation of the appreciation of beauty in the great ape's eyes. Oh, please. Are you comparing this to somebody actually, looking at jewelry or creating a drawing or something like that? You see that the ape could be looking for a mosquito. I don't know. But how do you know they're awed by beauty in the same way that a human being is? And certainly we know that they do not have self-reflective love as human beings do. We certainly know that they don't have consciences as human beings do. We certainly know that they do not have a sense of religion or spiritual life or transcendence as human beings do. There will be all kinds of signs of that if they had it. So we know there's like all these 7 major capabilities, right, that human beings have that
Right.
no other animal species has. So 200,000 years ago, our genetic ancestors did not have a soul. They were sitting at the border of Namibia and Angola, cracking coconuts and eating bananas.
So we saying the soul
Yeah.
takes up space in your brain?
No, 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 no.
Okay.
As you know, so basically, the soul presents itself with a whole lot of processes, and somehow or another, there seems to be an overlapping, kind of an intersection between what's going on in the cerebral cortex, that's the higher thinking functions, and the frontal cortex, that's the judging functions, right? There seems to be some kind of overlap. So we can see in that, like, you know, in those near-death experiences, right? When the soul body leaves the physical body, the soul body does have memories. We also know that the physical brain has memories. We see that, for example, that soul has emotions, and we can also see that the physical brain also produces a kind of emotion. So we see an overlap there. When we finally get to our genetic ancestors, 200,000 years ago, they didn't have a soul. But 60,000 years ago, you see everything happening, right? Development of mathematics, geographical dispersion throughout the entire world. They do all these things in 20,000 years. All kinds of things are going on, with this species of people that for 140,000 years doing nothing. So all of a sudden they become religious. Then they become artistic. All of a sudden you got a completely different species that's going on here. Well, let's call that the soul that's doing that at 60,000 years ago. And then you watch the cerebral development between the time of our 140,000 years ago ancestor, and then you put that soul, you introduce that soul into that first human being, and you can see that there is almost like an overlapping. There's some kind of a critical turn, in the development of the brain physiology along the lines of adapting to abstract functions, religious functions, higher emotions, spiritual functions, etc. Yeah, the presence of the soul actually, causes the brain to develop in a much higher ways to overlap and to adapt to the soul that's become part of its reality, the integral part of its reality.